We are live.
Dr. Suresh, you can start.
All right. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Lovely to have all of you here for this, what promises to be an absolutely scintillating discussion on the role of sports analytics and data intelligence from the perspective of deriving competitive advantage in a market which is becoming so increasingly competitive, and data seems to be the new currency by which everything is measured. Way back in 2002, there was a movie by the name of Moneyball that came out, which kind of alerted everybody to the role of data analytics, starring Brad Pitt. It was a story of the Oakland Athletics baseball team and how they used a particular technique called sabermetrics to basically figure out how to understand who are the most undervalued players on the team and how you can use them to the best advantage of the team. And the Oakland Athletics went on to win 20 consecutive games, which is a phenomenal streak in baseball. That's when people really got alerted to the role of data and what it can do for sports. Of course, even before that, data was being used, but this was perhaps the first systematic use of data in sports, and I think that was phenomenal. Fast forward to today, where every single team in virtually every sport is using data, and you think about how data and the role of analytics can play such a vital role in sports management. And there is a very interesting debate that can really be had on the role of data versus the role of the art itself, your technique or your talent and so on. And particularly in the context of performance management and so on, player management, this comes pretty much into contrast with each other and represent different points of view. So where we are today is, of course, the fact that there is a huge role for data analytics. There's a huge role for deriving advantage simply by the practice of the highest level of analytics, employing the cutting edge tools that can be brought to bear on data. Today, we are sitting here with a very august panel, phenomenal speakers who represent, perhaps the creme de la creme in terms of what data analytics can represent and how it can be used. We are proud to bring this together with Deakin University. Great Lakes and Deakin University are evaluating the opportunity of launching a sports management program in India, and we are really proud to bring this together with them and assemble such a wonderful panel of speakers. Great Lakes has been at the forefront of analytics in India. We are one of the top-ranked business schools in the area of analytics, and our students are second to none in this field. And therefore, there's a huge interest in analytics. But as we move along, obviously, how analytics is used, in what areas it is used, comes to the forefront. And today, sports management and sports analytics, in my opinion, is perhaps a sunrise area where there is a lot that can be done. And we are absolutely excited to bring this session to all of you. And without any further ado, I would really like to welcome all the speakers to this exhilarating discussion. And I would like to welcome my Ravneet Pahwa from Deakin to talk to you about what Deakin is also doing. And I think together this session will be an absolutely wonderful one. So welcome all of you. Ravneet?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Suresh. It's an absolute pleasure on behalf of Deakin University to welcome you all to this webinar, and to my colleagues on the panel. Thank you so much for being with us today. A very special thanks to Anil Kumble to be on this panel, and for Sundaraman to help put this together. It's been a pleasure. Folks, sports analytics is the next major thing in the sporting industry. In fact, I would say analytics and the use of technology and the use of artificial intelligence in any sector is a very important focus on what the future is going to bring. Deakin University is a leader in sports education in the world. And we are in the sporting capital of the world, which is Melbourne. I've got my colleague here, Professor David Shilbury, who needs no introduction to sports management and sports teaching in Australia and around the world. We are ranked globally for our sport management and sports science programs, top 5 in sports science and top 10 in sports management in the world. Curriculum covers aspects across management, science, governance, development, health, and physical education. Our elite athlete program helps students to balance their studies and also to see how best analytics can be used for efficiencies. The emphasis on developing women in sport is very, very core to Deakin University, and we have been doing programs in sports education for the last more than 20 years, being the first university in Australia to launch a sports education program. Our initiative to promote education in sport in India has been significant through various initiatives. And now we do endeavor to partner with Great Lakes to see how we can take this future more focused on the analytics side of engagement with sport. This webinar today is going to be focusing on the role of sports analytics in various functions of the industry and how educational institutions can enhance growth in sports analytics and management. 4 aspects of sports analytics will be presented, including marketing, consumer applications, player and game analysis, recruitment applications, and health and injury prevention applications, along with organizational capacity to do so. Also it will be discussed in where organizations are restructuring based on analytics, as well as the role of education institutions in promoting sports analytics. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to say on behalf of Deakin University, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for coming along. And I'm going to now ask, I think we've got next on the agenda is Suresh speaking? I'll put you on back to Dr. Suresh to take the agenda forward.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thank you, Ravneet. And I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Anil Kumble, who I guess doesn't need any introduction whatsoever. One of the absolute doyens of Indian cricket, and absolutely delighted to welcome you, Anil. You have, of course, donned the India colors with great pride, and you have rendered human service to the team. And even thereafter, you have played such a vital role in Indian cricket. So we are absolutely proud to welcome you. And in conversation with Anil will be Sundar Raman. Sundar has been formerly the CEO of Reliance Sports, and prior to that, he was the Chief Operating Officer of the IPL. So he again is a veteran and has extensive experience in sports. Sundar has been a consultant with Great Lakes for the last 1 year, helping us put together a sports management curriculum. We are talking about sports analytics. We have already had a wonderful elective on sports analytics that we had last year. And we look forward to working very closely with Sundar in the future as well. But today, Sundar is going to be in conversation with Anil, and this is going to be, I promise you, a delightful conversation. So Sundar, over to you, and take it away.
Thank you, Suresh, and thank you, Ravneet. Appreciate your kind introductions. And Anil, As always, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you,
Separated
Sundar.
by a few kilometers, but it's going to be an interesting conversation. Anil, I'm conscious of the time that we have, and the August panel that we have, and it's only fair that we have enough time of conversation with everybody. So I'm going to jump straight into the topic with you. You started as a cricketer pretty early, and your journey has been one that of a cricketer to a cricketing icon, as Suresh rightly put it. From there to off the field as a coach, a mentor for some of the leading teams, winning championships, and guiding the International Cricket Council in the capacity of the chair of the cricket committee, and of course as a sports tech entrepreneur. Uh, Tell us your journey and how you've seen data evolve from you as a bowler to you as a coach and you as a tech entrepreneur. What has that been, from no data to lots of data? Is that what it has been?
Yeah, thanks, Sundar. Thank you, Dr. Suresh Ramanathan. Thanks for inviting me over in discussion here today. Yeah, it's been a wonderful journey for me. Of course, Sundar, like you may imagine, in the early '90s, where I hardly saw my action of my own unless you sort of got the highlights package and watched it. So when I used to bowl at the start of my career, I felt that I was sort of bowling from close to the stumps until I saw my highlights and then said, "Oh, I'm literally going slightly wide of the crease and bowling." So that's the kind of changes that I had to bring in, looking at the video footage of television broadcast, and that was the only analysis that you could sort of get at that point in time. Until I'm sure you would know, Sundar. I started a company called Stump Vision, which was a data analytics package, where for the first time we took a computer into the Indian dressing room in 1996-97, and that's when I guess everybody was surprised that what would this computer do? How is that going to help us play better? And we started coding. It was more a extended sort of a data collection of the match. It was a scoring software, basically getting a little more detail of the wagon wheel and everything else, and other than the video footage. So that certainly helped in sort of getting some triggers of behaviors of bowlers when you're analyzing as a batting unit, trying to create strategies. Of course, then from there on, broadcast took a different turn. More camera angles meant that you would get slightly closer to the action. Better cameras obviously meant better footage, slow motion replays. Then you could sort of see the wrist position better. So all of that sort of made cricket a lot more interesting. And then if you look at data itself, I think from the early 2000s, its analyst has become a part and parcel of the team. And perhaps the first thing that you sort of put now in a team is to get the right analyst and the right data for you to come together and put together a informed decision when you make. And that's been the transition. Of course, all these technology inputs that has come into the game has mostly been broadcast driven, whether it is the Hawkeye, whether it is the spider cam, whether it's the stump microphone, whether it's the bales, whatever you call it. So that's how the broadcast has made data collection. And as you're aware, cricket is probably the one sport where you have millions of data. Every ball has probably more than 25 different variations of how you can play that particular ball. So even the variations of the ball itself can be multiple. So data collection, statistics has always been a discussion point for cricket, and the more data that has come in, the more information that you get. Like you said, yes, there is an overdose of data, but at the end of it, I think people like us, are still relevant, because you need to make sense of that data. Otherwise, data analysts like DJ would start, managing teams, and that's where the coaches come in and make sense of what the data is. So that's exactly what our role is. But having said that, I have also dwelled into getting into some sort of a sensor-based technology which will go on to the cricket bat, because we felt that that was a need, and that is something that I can certainly talk about.
No, so Anil, that's an interesting segue. You say a lot of data actually came in thanks to broadcasting because they wanted to keep the fans entertained, as if the cricket itself was not sufficient to entertain. So they wanted to put in more data, and it started with the ball tracking, right? I think considering cricket is a batsman sport, so much is tracked about the ball and almost nothing about the bat. And we will come to that and what you're doing in that space. Uh, Two couple of questions related to what you just said. When has been the point of inflection as you observe, since it started off with stump vision in 96, 97 to where we are now? And the advent of professional leagues around the world, has it helped accelerate and accept data? Has it catalyzed that? And also, is there receptivity among current players as well as young and upcoming players at the age group level to such levels of data?
Yeah, I think so. I think the inflection, probably for me, the first thing that helped in terms of the of understanding data was the speed gun. You sort of use that to your advantage, because for me as a bowler, the speed at which I bowled was very important. Although I was a
Mhm.
spinner, it was very important for me, the variation and what kind of speeds actually helped in getting better results on that particular surface. So that was the first thing for me. That was early 2000. And then I think the inflection point in terms of trying to put together teams based on certain data was, of course, the IPL. When you sort of started looking at putting together players in a squad. Yes, you have the international players who you are aware of. You know their capabilities. There is a precedence there. There is enough data on their performances, so that you sort of pick those players and put them in a squad. But when it came to unknown players, when it came to talent that you sort of wanted to back, and then also get some sort of data around who those players were, I think those metrics certainly helped, and that was the inflection point for me. And today, you sort of put together data, you sort of data mine and then put together a package where you look at the kind of players that you want in your squad based on data, especially with the unknown players, and that's something that has become second nature. And if you look at international cricket today, any batsman who gets out, when that particular batter walks back into the changing room, the first thing that they go and do is stand next to the data analyst and in front of the computer and see how they possibly got out or what they could have done better to still be there. So that's been the biggest difference, and the acceptance of data in understanding their own game, how one can improve, and the use of data for strategy. I think that is second nature now. It's a part and parcel of every team meeting, every discussion that happens around a group. So I don't think there is anyone who says, look, yeah, I mean, you still have to go with your gut feeling as a captain or as a player, saying, okay, this is something that I back. But most of the decisions that you take is informed because there is enough data to support that.
Interesting. Anil, you alluded to the fact that it started off with the ball tracker and the speed gun, right? For a for a game that is so overly dominated by batsmen, as most pundits keep talking about, the ball has remained the same, the bat has changed. There is very little that we know about the bat, right? I mean, with the amount of data that is around the ball, strangely, there's been much little to speak about the bat. When you say that's weekly time, is there a metric to it? Is there
Yeah.
something that you can say, oh, that's a great shot? It just remains in the adjectives area and superlatives area rather than measurability area, right? And
Yeah.
you've been a pioneer in that space with what you're doing with Spectracom. Help us understand what is it that we can expect out of the changing dimensions of a chip in the ball to a sticker in the bat. What is it that we can help to understand? How wide can it go?
I mean, like I said, you rightly put it, Sundar, that there's not much science behind the art of batting. We sort of
True.
discussed that as experts of someone being really powerful, so and so sweetly timed this. This has hit the sweet spot. What exactly is the sweet spot? How often do you actually get close to that sweet spot? Sweet spot. So this is where we put together the sticker. The other important aspect for any batter is the form factor of what you're going to put on the bat,
Yeah.
and the weight of that bat of that sensor as well. So that's something that we were very very aware of, and the sticker that I'm talking about from Spectacon, the power bat sticker that we have developed, is less than 10 grams, and it goes at the back of the bat to the bottom of the bat. It is non-intrusive. It comes under the ICC guidelines of the size of the sticker as well, and like I said, we haven't really profiled a batter. As a bowler, at least you have a fast bowler, you have a swing bowler, you have a leg break, off break, left arm, you have everything. But whereas a batter, it's mostly by positions. Opening batter, a middle order batsman, lower order batsman. So that's how you have sort of profiled a batter. So this certainly brings in a different element of showcasing what kind of a batsman that you are seeing, and the bat speed is something that we keep talking about. We keep hearing the experts saying, fast hands, bat speed is really good, but we don't know the measure of what that bat speed is. An Andre Russell hitting a six versus a Kane Williamson hitting a six. What's the difference? We know that Andre Russell is really powerful, but in terms of metrics, what is the difference? And that to me is the major change that I see Spectacon will bring about. And the other challenge that we also had was, how do you then get into a broadcast mode? Because you're fully aware, broadcast getting anything in the middle of a cricket match in a live event is massively difficult and equally challenging. So we thought, the best way to sort of do this is in broadcast, in a live event. How do you then get this matrix? And it needs to be in real time as well. So what we have developed will give you a bat speed, it'll give you a launch angle, it'll give you where exactly or how close were you in terms of the sweet spot. It'll give you a bat map, a heat map. We have all seen pitch maps around bowlers bowling in the good length area, whereas we have rarely seen any bat heat map. If someone scores 100, how many, where exactly did those 100 balls came
The
from.
bat.
So yeah, hit the bat. So I think this information will certainly bring in the fan closer to the game. And then again, cricket is all about discussing statistics, discussing which player is better than the other player, and you also go generations from one generation to the other. It's all about comparisons, and this will only bring in that element to the game. And having said that, as a professional cricketer, I also understand the form factor and the usability and the practicality of using a sensor on the bat, and that's why the form factor was very very critical. And I believe that this can certainly bring the element of a broadcast into this. Not only helps the fans engage better, it'll also bring in. I certainly believe that this is a great revenue stream for broadcast as well, because in-game analytics of a batter is something that is unique, and this can certainly build an ecosystem where I'm hopeful that it could be second nature, like how like you mentioned, Wyndham is also a part of this panel. Hawkeye is now it's second nature of how ball tracking is used. So I'm hopeful that the specs, which is the power score, will hopefully become a second. It will become a synonym with power hitting.
It's very, very interesting. I see two dimensions in what you're saying. One is clearly explaining the quality of better batting with metrics. And the second and more important thing that I see is is able to take a technology because of its form factor to a wider mass of people. Because you can't have a speed gun and a ball tracker and a Hawkeye in an Azad Maidan and Oval Maidan and
Right.
University Union ground and Lilo College ground, right? But
That's right.
a bad sticker is potentially available, and so I do see a day in the near future where people are sticking those Spectrocom stickers or the equivalents, and going around and playing in Shivaji Parks and saying, okay, this is how sweetly I timed, and that takes the game to the common masses. So very, very interesting segue, Anil, and I hope that more and more people considering your primary skill as a bowler, while acknowledging your all-round skills, it takes a bowler to explain batting better. That's the irony of it.
Yeah,
So
because we've always studied the batsman, right? What is the batsman's weakness? And although
yeah,
although no batsman actually acknowledges that there's a weakness in their batting, but and they always got out. They always got out to the concentration wasn't there, and it was bad. Focus wasn't
it's
there.
not a good ball.
It is not because of the skill of the bowler. Never acknowledged.
Uh,
I have not seen
so
a batsman
Anil,
acknowledge. I've not seen a batsman acknowledge a good ball.
that's worth a data point analyzing. So Anil, to keep it short, as I said, I'll come to the last question with you. Where do you see is data actually a competitive advantage, data intelligence competitive advantage in sport, and where do you see the next decade of this confluence of data and sport? Just crystal ball gaze for us.
I think the shorter the game, the sort of influence that data will have will be more and more, and the dependence on data will be a lot more, because in a short game, as the format sort of gets shorter, from Test cricket we've come to one-day cricket, then it's T20 now. So and then there's 100. So as the game gets shorter, the dependence on data is far more in putting together a squad, strategies, matchups. I mean, we keep talking about matchups, and that's how you sort of build a strategy around teams. So that will only be the driving factor. And I think technology, ideally will continue to improve. Whether it is decision making in sport. There's the influence of DRS already in cricket. I'm sure there will be more technology influence on decision making as we go along, and also players' acceptance of being a part of this innovation. Otherwise, you'll be left behind. I know there's that we are still sort of having that debate over, is this too much technology in sport, or should I just go back to my own belief that, okay, I just watch the ball, hit the ball. That's the simple way. Yes, that's the simple way. But then I think if you don't sort of adapt to technology that's coming in and use that technology for the good of the game, I think people will be left behind. I only see I don't see just the broadcasters influencing technology in the sport, but I think even federations will start looking at innovative ways of bringing in technology into sport, and not just the broadcasters, because all these years it's been television and broadcast who've pushed these innovations, which is great for the game. And as we move into other OTT platforms, there'll be more technology coming into sport, and that to me will be the biggest change that I see going forward.
And we have people from the OTT platform as a part of the next panel in Yannick and the rest of the gang. Anil, thank you so much. You've been generous with your time, and I know you have practices and rest of the tournament to complete. Wishing the very best for Kings Punjab, and may the best team win. And I'll on behalf of Great Lakes and Deakin, extend my sincere thank you to you, and hand it back to Dr. Suresh.
Thank you so much, Sardar. Thanks.
Thank you, Anil.
Dr. Suresh, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. So that was a wonderful discussion, and I really enjoyed it. And I hope all of you also enjoyed it as much as I did. But we now come to another very, very interesting discussion, a panel discussion that is going to be moderated by Dr. David Shilbury from Deakin University, who's chair of the sports management program there. And on this panel, we have an absolutely wonderful group of people. Yannick Colasau from who's the co-founder and chief business officer of FanCode. Yannick has previously served as a managing director of NBA India and also the chief operating officer of Nimbus Sports. Mustafa Gauss, who's a former professional tennis player and currently the CEO of JSW Sports. CKM Dhananjay, who's currently the performance manager of the Mumbai Indians. He was also the Indian cricket team's data analyst in 2007. Wyndham Richardson, who's the managing director and co-founder of Pulse Live, and they are a digital partner to some of the biggest names in sports, including the English Premier League, World Rugby, IPL, and Barcelona. And to round it off, we have Dr. Suresh Srinivasan from Great Lakes, who is a distinguished professor of strategy and has a wide-ranging experience in a lot of different industries, including manufacturing, banking, and service, and will provide a very interesting perspective on the competitive advantage side of things. So without any further ado, let me welcome the panel, and I'm looking forward to a terrific discussion. Thank you. David, over to you.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you very much for the opportunity to host this panel and to moderate, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. I can see our panelists turning on their cameras. They're all very handsome gentlemen, as you can see, and let's get into it. What I'd like to do to start with, you've all been introduced very briefly just a moment ago, but I'd like to start with you, Yannick, and then work through the panel and just have you talk to us a little bit about a bit more detail about your role and how you connect with data and sport analytics specifically.
Sure. Thanks, David, and thanks, Dr. Suresh, for having me on this. Yeah, so I've as Dr. Suresh gave a little bit of background, I've been fortunate enough to have been in the sports industry and worked within the sports industry for my entire career, over 2 decades of my professional life. I like to say that unlike Mustafa and Anil, I'm actually a failed professional sports athlete. And what I did was I got the opportunity to realize the dream of being involved in professional sports by actually getting the business of sports. And I worked with IMG, Nimbus, the NBA, and recently co-founded my own sports fan platform called FanCode. So yeah, so I think I've throughout my professional career, obviously not when I played amateur sport 20-25 years ago, but throughout my professional career, data has been something that has been not just something which has captivated me, but I've always believed that it is something which essentially decides success and failure, not just of businesses, but of industries. The ability to use data to predict what's coming next, predict what consumer wants next. That's something that really is something that's driven everything that we've done, and also something that's motivated us setting up FanCode, which is a digital platform for sports fans. So if I was to actually look at in a very broad, and I know David, you've got to go through the other panelists also, but in a very broad introduction of how we at FanCode and how I look at data, right? They're actually two big segments. One is, and I know Sundar and Anu spoke about this earlier, one is data which a consumer uses. So, all the things that have been developed to deliver more value to a consumer, what Wyndham has created in Hawkeye, speed guns, all those things which help engage a consumer more. That's using that data or providing the analytics out of that for a consumer, for consumption, and using that to better engage a customer and better engage a consumer. And the second, which is really a foundational part of us at FanCode and the entire Dream Sports network, is data for decision making. As a direct to consumer product, our focus on data is that everything we do is based on a hypothesis, right? It's based on the concept of how do you use data to make a decision, and then how do you actually look at the actual results of that decision, and then learn from that by actually using it against or marking it against the hypothesis that you sent. So yeah, data and data analytics are a really important part of most tech companies across the world. And for us at FanCode, It's not just, I think it's the start and the end of everything we do, both from a consumer perspective as well as a product development and a business perspective.
Thanks, Yannick. Very nice. Let me move now to Mustafa Gauss. Welcome. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you, David. Nice to be here.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Perhaps you can do something similar, a brief introduction to what you do and how you connect with data. And we'll come back in a second round of questions just to dig a bit more deeply into that in the next round.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think from our perspective, because of the diversity in our portfolio of investments when it comes to sport, we work very closely with the high performance angle of sport, with Olympic athletes, and because of our involvement with 3 franchises, football, kabaddi, and now most recently the IPL, there is a huge dependence on data with regards to team performances, athlete performances. There is an element of recovery back to sport from injury perspective, where now data and inputs and assessments have become extremely important. As Anil also touched upon briefly, the use of data and stats for your auction strategies is now par for the course. Everyone is reliant on that, and we've had to use that across all our franchises. So that is definitely a very key component. And then now, slowly, I think over the last few years, we're starting to see a lot of dependence and need for data and for analytics on the business side of sport as well. You're seeing, when you're talking about sponsorship packages, you're talking about monetization of your assets. There is a huge involvement of data that is coming into play. It's not yet as evolved as you would see it in Australia or the US or other parts of Europe, but it is starting to play a role in India as well. And I think for us, yeah, it's the, like Yannick mentioned, it's the start and end point now suddenly for everything that we're doing. And yeah, it's integral now.
Thank you. Very good. If I could move now to CKM and Dhananjay. Do I note that they're all referring to you as DJ? Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Am I allowed to do the same?
Of course, of course, of course.
DJ,
so
welcome.
That's easier to spell, yeah.
Yeah, it's very short.
Yeah, of course.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Perhaps you could give us a brief insight to your current role and also how you connect with data in that role.
Of course, of course. Thank you for having me here, and it's nice to see some, some known faces here, and it was a superb discussion that Sundar and Anil kind of triggered off. So I've been typically involved in the performance side of sport, especially cricket, over the last 17 years. So I've worked with the national cricket team as an analyst, started as an analyst, and slowly moved into roles that can kind of help organizations, sports organizations, kind of digitally transform themselves. And now I'm playing the role as a manager of performance and data in Mumbai Indians, where I try to connect all the pieces across all the departments. But not only that, kind of play the role of creating a data culture that's kind of most important to drive decision making across all departments. So yeah, I'm kind of a data evangelist, and like Yannick, Anil, Sundar just talked about, and even Mustafa, I think it's become like a horizontal that you apply across all business segments in sport. So anything that is driving the top line of an organization or even the bottom line, analytics seems to be an horizontal that is getting applied, and that's pretty exciting. The possibilities are exciting, and how it can drive decision making and performance and impact growth is very, very interesting. So yeah, just that's about me.
Thank you, DJ. I'd like to come back in the next round to explore that last point you made a little more deeper, the relationship between the on-field data analytics and how you've been involved with some of the off-field side of the business as well, because that's increasingly becoming important, as you've rightly noted. Now, if I may turn to the UK. Welcome to Wyndham Richardson. Wyndham, would you like to tell us?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. So yeah, thanks very much for having me. So yeah, I essentially wear two hats. I sit on the board of Hawkeye, which we've obviously briefly covered today, and I co-founded Pulse Live. So as you said, we're proud digital partner to some of the biggest names in sport. And so what does that mean? It's really for us to create experiences that sports fans can't live without, and to help our clients, very large organizations, to gain competitive advantage off of the pitch or the field, the wicket. And I suppose maybe to start the conversation, we founded Pulse in 2008, and I've obviously witnessed over the last 10, 12 years, a lot of conversation around data. I would say that actually performance data and the way it is used to drive performances at a professional level is far ahead of where the sports industry is when it comes to how we use fan data to drive competitive advantage off the field. And so we're really at the very beginning of this journey. People like to talk about it, but in terms of what one actually can do, I think the sports industry is quite far behind a lot of other industries. And so we've got some catching up to do, but I think that there's a lot of good sort of learnings that we can take elsewhere. And so for us, it's all about how can we drive more engagement for sports fans? And that starts with the data. So how can we, based on their various different touch points, which might be websites, mobile apps, what they're doing in the way of transactions, buying tickets, merchandise, how can we drive greater levels of engagement by treating them as individuals? And then off the back of that, how can we learn to drive more commercial activity? And so, yeah, lots to consider, but really, as I said, I think that we are just at the very beginning of this journey when it comes to sport, and there's a long way to go. There's a lot of great steps that are now being taken, but globally, this is not just in any sort of one territory that we're far behind. I think even if you look at some of the more mature markets, there's perhaps perception that we're further ahead than we are. So I think that's really exciting, and I'm sure we'll sort of come back to some of those themes in the remainder of the session.
Thanks, Wyndham. Appreciate that. And I would sort of like to come back to the fan data side of things. And when we come back to you, perhaps we might be able to listen to some examples of how you've seen it work and what the results might look like. So look forward to that. And welcome to Professor Suresh Srinivasan. Welcome. Just have to unmute yourself. No, you need to unmute.
Yeah, thank you, David. So I have been in the industry working along with companies as to how they create competitive advantage for about 2 decades across the globe. And, you know, that dwells down into the very strategy making process of these kind of companies. And in the last decade, I've been investing more time in teaching, research, and bringing the same strategy across to the students. Now, looking at very different industries and how companies have been doing this, right? With the era before the data and analytics came into the picture, the moment you see how data has changed the very strategy making process across industries, it gives very interesting insights. And especially if you have to compare that and look at the kind of similarities and the kind of differences that need to be explicated with the sports analytics and within the sports industry, I think that makes a lot of, very interesting areas to be looked into, especially, sports analytics is more than on-field kind of analytics that are being captured today. There are off-field, there are commercial sides of it. There are large investors coming into the kind of sports business. I mean, each of them are being run like as if it's a Fortune 500 company. I mean, the way the professionalism is being built up and how data, and especially when I work along with companies on the kind of execution of those strategies to make them work on ground, I think that's where the lot of companies fall apart, and what lessons we can learn from that when we're looking into the sports analytics part of it. These are some of the interesting areas which I thought I'll share with the panel.
Thanks, Suresh. Just to stay with you for a moment, from the work that you've done and observing what's happening in the sports marketplace and the use of data and analytics generally, are there 2 or 3 tricks or critical ingredients that managers and analysts should be thinking about in terms of competitive advantage?
Right, that's a very interesting question, David. Actually, if you look at it, I see this as three legs to a tripod. The first leg is the entire data collection part of it, which today, I think what we heard Anil speak and Sundar speak. I mean, there's so much of intelligent stadiums, smart tennis courts available, completely wired with sort of sensors. Right, data is being captured, sensors within the racket on the kind of guts they are calculating and capturing the motion of the players. So advent of data is quite huge. The big data that is coming out, technology is advanced, the price is quite affordable today. So that part of the tripod leg, I think we are doing extremely well. The second part of it is how this data is actually captured and analyzed to get into some kind of a clear, actionable insights, which is going to make performance differentials, right? Even in this leg of the tripod, there are quite a bit of capabilities available today. There are analysts, advanced statistics techniques that are used, and you could be able to come to predictive algorithms. That's fine. The third leg is actually, I would put it as the business context of the sport itself. I mean, the whole sort of stakeholders coming into the picture, off field, the kind of investments they make, the kind of return on investments that is actually required, the sponsorships coming in, and the player management, the kind of training, coaching, the kind of injury side of it. Now, when you put this tripod together, in the industry, when you look at it, the kind of business side of the people have a perspective, which the kind of technology people who run the kind of analytics may not see eye to eye, or there is some amount of misalignment. If you're able to bring those two together, right, make each of these kind of constituencies look at each other to develop certain, algorithms that will meet the precise pain points of those stakeholders, I think that's going to be a winner. And I think that is where I think the real skill sets and talent in this particular industry needs to be developed. And precisely that's possibly where Great Lakes and Deakin come together, picking up those kind of skill sets and talents who have a passion for the sport, understands the business side of the sport, understands statistics and advanced analytics, bringing them together and intermeshing that and looking into, providing that kind of an integration to make it as a solid tripod standing there. I think that part is going to be extremely critical. And of course, monetizing these kind of investments is going to be a little bit of an issue which we see in other industries, because the customer needs to see the value before he makes these kind of payments. But that's a question of time, and it's not a big challenge, but it's just a question of time. So I think if these two are managed, I think those are going to make a big difference in this kind of industry.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yannick, if I can come back to you. I was interested in the choice of Fan Code as the name of your business. Is there a strategic logic to that?
No, I wish there was, but no. I think that the principles that we actually came up with the name was one is we're a technology company, right? Unlike a lot of other sports distributors, we are primarily a technology company. So our talent is primarily engineering, right? That's what we are building. The entire idea about setting up this platform was to essentially use digital and use technology to be able to solve sports fan problems at scale. The ability to get that data in real time. I mean, like Sundar, I've also been involved in broadcast in the past, right? When broadcast and linear broadcast in sports, when you had a problem, what you did was you essentially created almost an offline solution, right? So for example, if you did research around the IPL and you saw that there was this whole, bunch of consumers who wanted in-depth analytics during the break, and they didn't want to see ads. They're willing to pay for it. You then took that research in, you then prepared for 5 months, you built a studio, you did this analytics around it, and then you were ready for next IPL. Technology allows you to do that in the same day, right? You get feedback, you get the ability to talk to a customer and to constantly get feedback and to be able to make decisions from that feedback is essentially what drove us. And I think that's really what we are seeing also in terms of, how we are using data analytics, and also what we believe. If you look at the biggest consumer brands today in technology, their largest strength has really been the ability to look at this entire lake of data they're getting from consumers, and then mold that, mesh that into solving problems that they are trying to solve. Look at Amazon, look at Facebook, look at Google. That's been the primary way their business has been. They've got great products, but how the product has developed, how it's modified, how it's kept refining itself has been on the basis of feedback from customers, which in traditional sense, 20 years back, you took weeks and months of research to get. Now you get it in real time, and sometimes you get too much of data. It's the ability to actually then create write dashboards on that and use that data to be able to use to solve problems both from a business and a consumer perspective.
Very good. Thank you for that insight. Mustafa, if I can come back to you, one of the points you made in your introduction was a reference to using data analytics, etc., to help with sponsorship type decisions and data that might lie behind that. Can you give us some insight to what sort of data you'd look to be collecting and how you would massage it or manipulate it, if that makes sense, to helping make decisions in the sponsorship area?
Absolutely, David. I think, and I guess because of the circumstances over the last 2 years where digital sponsorship has been accelerated and has become a lot more important than the conventional routes that we used and adopted in India in the pre-COVID times. There has been a lot more importance and need of understanding exactly who you're targeting, what type of response you're getting basis your strategies and your plans, and the type of are you being able to reach out to that target because of what you're doing. So yes, being able to capture that type of information has helped us package better in terms of our sales sponsorship packages, and it's also in terms of the digital packages that we put together. I think the ability to capture data on who you're reaching, on how you're reaching them, how they're absorbing this, the type of impressions that you're making on this whole endeavor has helped us. We did get an understanding of how little we were able to monetizing our social media content. Now that was something we picked up on through last season's IPL, where we realized that while we were putting out a lot of content, we were not monetizing even 5-6% of that, and that's a huge gap when it comes to understanding how international teams do it. And that was something that we've been able to improve going into this season. So yeah, I mean, yes, there is a lot of information that comes in. It is really up to you to see how you pick what you can act on and what is important to you as an organization. And yes, a lot of it is very quick. And you can make corrections and changes in your game plan pretty much in real time. And that's the beauty of it, I think.
Just a quick follow on from that. Where would you extract most of your data to inform sponsorship decisions? From what source?
Well, a lot of it is off our social media platforms. We've also now started adopting softwares that allow us to track this type of information. So we do have partnerships in place where you have software platforms that allow you to track such information. So it's a mix of both.
Thank you. And DJ, if I come back to you, you mentioned earlier in your introduction the increasing link between what's been done on the field to understand data and analytics performance into the front office, if I can put it that way, the business of sport. Are there any examples you can share with us where you've been able to help, the marketers and those involved in that side of the business to make better decisions based on appropriate data?
So I think that it's more to do with the fact that when you connect on-pitch performance and off-pitch performance, I think that traditionally you are trying to solve at least the high performance side, you're trying to solve 4 important pillars, which is identifying talent, developing your talent, and trying to keep your talent on the pitch without injuries, which would mean that your sponsorships and your ability to increase your commerce increases, and maximizing your on-pitch performance. So which is typically around the fact that the more you're helping the team to win games I think that it kind of directly reflects around all the other things. I'm sure the rest of the panel would agree with me on that as well. But more interestingly, I think that all organizations are going through a major shift around becoming a data organization first, and trying to, in the first part of the conversation, Anil mentioned about data being, there are various data sources that are coming in. Mustafa touched upon that, but my point is that first it is the infrastructure that you need to create in order for data to come in, and ultimately what to do with that at the end of the day, the automation part that comes around the same. We are talking about, we talked about the chip on the bat, we are talking about the chip in the ball, we are talking about GPS, we're talking about so many automated sources of data through sensors or through computer vision that is coming through, but ultimately it has to talk to each other. The sports science data should talk to the performance data, and so on and so forth. So I think that the more you are building a data organization, the more you're going to help the other side, the business of sport, in terms of maximizing everything around the same. But I think that for with summer, I mean, I think that initially someone touched upon AI, but for AI to happen, I think that these three areas are very important: the infrastructure, the data, the automation around the same. So I think I'd kind of put it that way in terms of it's interrelated. I think that performance kind of drives the top line. So the more you invest in that, and the more you're able to kind of maximize your on-pitch performance, the more it's going to kind of help the business side of sport.
Thank you. Now, if I could return to Wyndham. Wyndham, there's been reference to Hawkeye and the DRS and so forth. DRS, in your view, is that a form of fan engagement? Putting aside the cricketers on it.
Mm-hmm. So I think the data that is collected through Hawkeye in general provides many opportunities to engage the fan. Whether or not DRS itself, obviously, I think there's probably arguments on both sides there, and that obviously spans into lots of other sports when you look at how Hawkeye is being applied in tennis, football, etc. But when you actually look at the amount of data that's collected for that service to run, that is something that does, I think, drive a lot of engagement at different levels, and something that we look at is very much the needs of the fan, and you've got a certain percentage of your audience that wants to dive deep into that, and they're looking for the tools in order to allow them to find those stories. And then you've also got a very large percentage of your audience that want to be given the insight at exactly the right time in something that's snackable, that they find immediately engaging, and then off they go. And that really, I guess, then segues back into how we're trying to use fan data, which is trying to understand each individual user, what their own preferences are, what drives their engagement, what keeps them interested, and then to serve those different experiences. And so it's all around how we orchestrate the experiences that they're interfacing with, and that's across all of these different touch points. And so I think, as DJ shared, the ecosystem required to make that happen is quite significant. But today versus even just 5 years ago, the technology required is so much easier to get access to. A lot of it's being commoditized. And so maybe just one very quick example as to how we're trying to use data to actually increase engagement. FC Barcelona, one of our big clients, we have been running experiments. I think Yannick's made some good points around the fact that experiments are absolutely front and center to being able to successfully leverage data. And one of the experiments we've been using is around videos that we serve across FC Barcelona's own website, mobile app. And the experiment we ran was essentially just to serve up the normal promoted content that they showcase, that their editorial team drive on a day-to-day basis, with a subset of users where we were showing them videos that we thought they were more likely to engage with based on videos they'd previously engaged with. And the way we did that was we tracked clickstream behavioral data of all of their video consumption. And then we simply send that off to Amazon Web Services. They have a service called Personalize, which is what drives Amazon.com's clever targeted marketing machine. And then that just comes back with recommendations for that individual user. And what we saw in that experiment was that users engaged with more videos by 25%. And so that's a very clear example where we're using data and we're driving, a positive outcome for our client. And I think that's just, that is basic when we look at where things will get to, but it's just a relevant example, I guess, that stitches together all those different considerations around capturing data and then how you can activate on that data.
Yeah, one of the themes I think starting to emerge already from this discussion is what, perhaps the word integration across the organization, integration of data sets and integration of strategic thinking seems to be a common theme that's evolving from this. Now, I'm conscious of time, and perhaps David Das or Ravneet can give me some direction here. Do we have scope to continue and allow for a couple of questions from those that are viewing?
We already crossed the timeline, so we will endeavor to answer most of the queries, but perhaps you might want to take one or two questions, David.
All right, one or two, thank you. I've got one question here that I can see on my screen. I'll read it to you. It's a bit long, but we'll work out who's best placed to answer it. How difficult is it for an analyst in the Indian sport ecosystem compared to English or Australian sports ecosystems to convince management that an underrated player will be beneficial against a particular opponent instead of an experienced player B? In other words, the Moneyball concept. Considering that in India, fans treat players as demigods, what role do these fan sentiments play in sport analytics in India? Anyone like to kick that one off?
Yeah, I can take that. I can take one part of that for sure. I think that it's from a performance standpoint, the lack of baseline. It's not about what's happening in Europe or what's happening in India, but I think the lack of if there is no baseline, then it's very hard to benchmark. So in cricket, the question mentions Moneyball. Like Anil mentioned, the variables are so high, and the context around how to select a player is so complex that it kind of makes it difficult from a recruitment standpoint to kind of come up with a clear scouting methodology in terms of arriving at that. Slowly, now there are other possibilities that are coming through where, literally most of your domestic games are live scored, and the data that can come out of that can help you make some decisions. But in terms of the sentiment, in terms of the crowd sentiment or the fan sentiment, I think that it's from an internal practitioner perspective, or the practitioners who are kind of making those decisions around selecting players, it really doesn't affect them much. But on the other hand, I think that data-driven selections or data-driven decision-making around selections is kind of on the rise with all the practitioners who are making those decisions. So Anil kind of touched upon it by saying that it's coaches and managers are getting more and more relevant because they're embracing data as one of their tools to kind of validate their gut feel or decision making. I think that is kind of on the rise, and for all these practitioners to make smarter decisions, it is giving them access to kind of do that. So selections are getting smarter, recruitment is getting smarter. Literally most IPL teams are investing in trying to get access to more data at a granular level in order to make recruitment decisions. League-wide data sharing is on the rise across the world. And I'm sure that in India, slowly it will be a standard. And I mean, even platforms like FanCode is kind of opening it out in terms of access to games, even at the grassroots level. And slowly, from a pathway perspective, all these things are opening up. So I think that it will only get smarter and better as we go along.
Thanks, DJ. Does anyone else wish to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a perspective from a team management perspective, angle. I think if you asked this question about 5-6 years ago, the answer would probably be very different. But I think the comfort and confidence that coaches and coaching staff are now developing with data and the facts that the stats are actually replicating the reality on the pitch. Everyone is a lot more comfortable using that. I totally agree with DJ. There's no decisions that are made on fan perception and the reaction that it may have. I think everything is made on the basis of what's best for the team, basis the scenario, the matchups, and if you are going to throw an unknown into it, most times than not, there is enough and more data and research and comfort and confidence that that unknown has something special to bring to the table. So I think from a team perspective, fans may not have all that information, and they may think that by not going with a tried and tested, you are breaking away from a winning formula. But I think most times than not, teams have a clear thought process.
Thanks, Mustafa. All right, I've got time for one more question before I ask each of the panel members just to provide a kind of brief summary of what they think the future will look like. DJ, this looks like it's for you as well. Is it, and I think it's probably a fairly quick answer, is any predictive model being used for injury/concussion management and planning for recruitment of the team?
I'll unpack this into two parts. For the first part, it's from an injury prediction perspective. Yes, there is a lot of predictive analytics being used with the advent of more automation around, on-field performance and off-field, even measuring practice sessions. So we are able to kind of help the sports science practitioner and the sports medicine practitioners make some really informed decision around the same. So with regard to concussion, I think that's a pretty new aspect of the game, at least in cricket at this point of time. And I think that there is research that is happening across the world with, especially with helmet makers as to having sensors on the helmet to kind of have the impact done and everything, but it's still not in practical usage, I would say. So there's not much of movement in that space, though it is progressing in that space. So yeah, that's more or less the answer.
Thank you for that. Now, I appreciate that we've run out of time and there are a lot more questions that we have, but unfortunately we won't be able to get to them this afternoon. But to help us try and bring this together, I'm going to ask each of the panelists if they might just give a quick overview of what they think the future looks like before we close today's webinar. Yannick, if I can start with you.
Sure. I wish I knew the answer to that question, but yeah, I think in context to what we're talking about here, I think both data and analytics, aside from being these buzzwords that people keep using around a lot, I think the rigor that goes into building and understanding data, the rigor that goes into solving problems and actually delivering outcomes by using analytics is something which every young aspiring student should look to. The outcomes are a result. I mean, DJ can talk about this also. A result of a lot of hard work. Analytics is about getting into the weeds of data, and it's not just the outcomes that you see, on television and stuff. So I think going forward, I think a lot more young minds and very bright young minds are going to be inspired by what some of the outcomes and some of the opportunities in data and data analytics. And I hope that through Great Lakes and Deakin, you guys will also be able to bring together the next set of minds working on all aspects of data analytics, from player performance to business performance to consumer engagement.
Thank you. Mustafa.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree with Yannick. I don't know if I have the answer either, but I think it's evolving. It's evolving at a very fast pace. And the fact that you guys have collaborated to put a program together just shows the importance that everyone is giving to this subject, and the fact that we're here discussing it is just adding to that. It's integral. It's integral to the growth of sports organizations, and I think it's going to evolve and keep evolving for us to, and it's up to us to kind of direct it in a way that's beneficial for everyone.
Thank you. To DJ.
Yeah, I clearly see three things happening from a futuristic standpoint. Would be the fact that there is a big shift that's happening from BI to AI. When I mean that, there's going to be more simulation-driven stuff that's going to be happening around performance, at least. And I think that the second part is that I think there's going to be a lot of hyper-personalization of how you want to serve a player, or how a practitioner wants to use the data, and so on and so forth. So practitioners, athletes, and everyone around the ecosystem are going to get smarter, and they're going to get access to hyper-personalized information. So that's going to drive the next level of growth. And finally, I think that like there is a player pathway, there's going to be a pathway in data analytics related to sports. So which is right from the industry and academia connect that everyone is talking about. I think that's going to get strengthened. Along with that is going to give out the possibilities of the entire thing. So data in performance, it's not just about an analyst or something like that. It's kind of moved on. So there's a data engineering aspect to it. There is a data modeling aspect to it. There is a data interpretation aspects to it, where practitioners tend to kind of interpret the data finally, like Anil mentioned. Otherwise, it's so ultimately, I think that these kind of opportunities are going to only increase around the data ecosystem, and give rise to more possibilities and careers along the way. And I think, like others put out correctly, the programs like this is going to kind of enhance and kind of amplify this whole building process around the same. So it is it can't get more exciting, at least from my perspective. So it look forward to all the innovations that are coming through.
Thanks, DJ. And to Wyndham.
Yeah, I think everything that DJ just shared there applies off of the pitch as well. I think that it's going to be sink or swim. If organizations don't become a lot more aggressive and mature in their data infrastructure knowledge and how they apply that, then I think you're going to see quite significant disruption and success for ultimately those that are really looking at the ways in which it can drive better outcomes. And so I think from a fan experience, it's going to be only good news. I think you're going to have a much more seamless experience, a lot more targeted, much more of a situation where the organization is treating you as an individual. And a lot of that will be achieved through programmatic and AI. But of course, it requires data scientists and so many different expertise that does not exist in the sports industry today to be able to make sense of that data and to leverage the technology in the right way. So likewise, really excited, and it is honestly going to require a lot of people that don't work in sport today to embark on this journey, because there are not enough people in the world, full stop, when it comes to data scientists, etc., and people who can do this. So I hope, if anything, this is something that's been achieved today, is to inspire some people to think about that.
Thanks, Wyndham. And Suresh, if I could turn to you, as should be the case, an academic should have the last word to close out the panel, and then I'll hand back to Suresh. I need to unmute.
As all of my co-panelists mentioned, I think data and analytics has arrived, and it is at the center of all sorts of decisions that are being made. And one of the biggest challenges today is the integration of the data science part of it, the algorithm part of it, and the understanding the customer's pain points, and eventually delivering that. Eventually that has to happen, that integration. So young mind students, if they're able to do this kind of an integration process, understand the nuances of both sides, plus also have some kind of passion for the sport, I think many of them may be viewing this webinar and they are the winners. I think there's a huge opportunity, and that's where Deakin and Great Lakes come together on this initiative. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. If I could now hand back to Suresh to close today's webinar. Thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, David. That was absolutely wonderful and beautifully moderated session, and amazing perspective shared by all the panelists. So I wanted to thank the entire panel here, and wanted to thank Anil and Sundar to begin with for a wonderful fireside chat, that delved very deep into the role of data and how, and Anil's own personal journey in terms of how, he saw the use of data evolve over time. And so that, Sundar, thank you very much for moderating that discussion and that chat. And then, of course, David and the panel, the entire panel, Yannick, Mustafa, DJ, Wyndham, and Suresh, thank you very much. Your perspectives were absolutely spectacular, and we really enjoyed this entire discussion. As I was listening to all of this, I was reminded of, how things have evolved so quickly. I mean, if you think about the practice of how data is now being incorporated into every aspect of the functioning of a sports organization. A few years ago, that was not the case. But as you go along, the panelists, I think, rightly brought out the fact that competitive edge is really going to come about from how data are actually going to be harnessed and used and analyzed, and the kind of insights that can be generated from that. Especially, DJ mentioned the idea of hyper personalization, and he talked about how data can actually be used in a way that every viewer, every person who's actually consuming that experience can have something unique for themselves. These are spectacular insights. I mean, Yannick also mentioned this at some point, talking about how some people might actually choose to consume data during the time when normally they would be exposed to ads. These are all really interesting ways by which we can enhance the user experience, and organizations can possibly gain a lot of monetization that can possibly happen because of this. So as I can see that, the future is extremely bright, and particularly I think the need of the hour is for highly contemporary programs, particularly preparing the next generation of enthusiasts who are interested in getting into this area, and developing a very strong interest in analyzing data, using these data, harnessing these data, and then developing insights that can that can basically provide a competitive advantage to various organizations, not just the sports organizations themselves, but to broadcasters and others, and fantasy leagues. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of opportunities that are there, possibilities that are there, and so I want to thank the entire panel. I want to thank Ravneet and David from Deakin as well for having put together this entire discussion. David, thank you very much for having done this for us, this moderating this panel. Sundar, thank you very much. We look forward to a very fruitful engagement, and we look forward to taking this forward. So watch the space. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.